rack I have chosen for this bike is the Topeak QR Beam Rack MTX. It has the special track on it for the MTX bags. And to install it, I'll put it here. And line it up as straight as I can over the wheel. Yeah, it looks pretty good. A big concern with this type of rack setup is the possibility of the bottom of the rack hitting the tire when the shock is fully compressed. So the way to figure out how much rack clearance you need is to actually, in this case, take the coil spring off of this shock so that you can easily compress the cylinder all the way to the that rubber pad that's on there, and then you will be able to look and see exactly how much distance you have between rack and tire. You can see here with the spring off, the shock is fully compressed, and that's how much room there is between the rack and the rear tire. So this is why I selected the A-type rack. You can see how it angles upward like that instead of going straight out or angling down. This rack is recommended for size small frames, but that's for hardtails. So even though this bike is a medium size, I had to use this rack that is for small size hardtail bikes. So since this is an MTX rack, I can use the bag that I showed in the other video that I had mounted to the hardtail frame rack. And just locks into place like that. With this MTX beam rack, there are various bags you can buy from Topeak. If you want to use the ones that have the panniers that fold out, you have to buy these dual side frames. I'm not sure if that would work with a full suspension setup. Topeak says the weight limit for this rack is 20 pounds. They say the weight limit for the bag is whatever the rack weight limit is. They also say that this bag weighs about 2.53 pounds. So if I put 4 of these 5-pound plates in there, that'll be 20 pounds plus the weight of the bag. It'll be 22.53 pounds, which is over the limit. But I'm going to test this out anyway. I'm going to do some twists and turns, see if the rack shifts out of place. So under just kind of regular riding conditions, looks like it stayed in place, held up pretty well. If I turn it around, that it is kind of shifting a little bit. So since this is quick release, I can't really quantify the clamping force that's being applied to it. So I can just kind of describe it by feel, which is sort of a kind of a rough way to describe things, but there is another kind of rack. This is not a Topeak, so it doesn't have that nice MTX track on it, but it does have 4 bolts. So with that, you can actually measure the torque that you're applying to the bolts with a torque wrench to better quantify what you're doing. I actually like the bolted design, but all these companies seem to be going to the quick release because people like the convenience of that. I should also mention that when you have weight loaded in here like 20 pounds, it does cause the rack and also the seat post to flex somewhat. When you have it sitting still like this, it's called dead load. If you're moving, you're riding the bike and bouncing around up and down, it's called live load. In the live load situation, you're going to get even more flex at the point of impact. So you have to consider that when you're trying to figure out the distance you need between the rack and the tire. Another thing to consider is the torque applied to the seat post and to the frame because of the weight on this rack. The more weight you have and the farther out the weight is placed, the more stress you're going to have on the seat post and the frame. When you're riding and going over bumps and jumps, you have impulse forces, and those put even more wear and tear on the seat post and the frame. So with this kind of setup, you are going to wear out your seat post and frame more quickly than if you did not do this. And that's something to consider, because if the seat post or the frame were to break, then you would fall onto the wheel and get caught between the wheel and the frame. So you really don't want that to happen. It'd be a really bad day. Another drawback to this setup is going to be if you are trying to ride down a steep decline and you need to lean back. You need to lean yourself back. This bag being up high like this is going to be in your way. You're not going to be able to do that because if you lower this, then you're going to lose the clearance that you need. So you can't lower this rack, you cannot lower this seat. And so if you do need to lean back and this is in your way, you might have a problem going down a steep decline, actually flipping forward and smashing your face into the ground. I am going to be doing an off-road test with this bike with this bag mounted to it, but I'm not going to be having it loaded up with 20 pounds of plates. I have other items that I will be loading into this. They're more practical for a trail ride situation.